I worked alone at a lighthouse for 87 nights before I realized the beacon wasn't warning ships. It was talking to something, and every night, something answered back. The first reply appeared exactly 32 seconds after sunset on my third day. At the time, I thought it was another vessel, a ship, a fishing trawler, maybe even another lighthouse far out on the water. That's what I told myself, because the alternative was impossible. The lighthouse sat on a rocky island nearly 9 miles from the mainland. The nearest inhabited coastline was barely visible on clear days. No houses, no docks, no islands, nothing, just black ocean stretching forever. And yet every evening, shortly after the beacon came alive, a second light appeared on the horizon. One flash, pause, two flashes, pause, one flash. Always the same pattern, always from the same location, and always directly facing me. The official name of the lighthouse was Eastwatch Point, but nobody called it that anymore. The supply boat captain called it the Needle. The maintenance workers called it the Grave. The older fishermen simply refused to talk about it. I didn't think much about any of that when I accepted the job. I needed money. Simple as that. The contract paid almost triple what I made working harbor security. 6 months alone, maintaining an aging lighthouse. Monitor equipment, log weather conditions, inspect the generator, keep the beacon operational. Easy. At least that's what I thought. The previous keeper left before I arrived. Nobody ever introduced us. Nobody gave me his number. Nobody even told me his name. When I asked why, the supervisor just said he didn't want contact. That felt strange, but not strange enough. Not then. The island itself was tiny. A lighthouse, a storage building, a weather station, and a small living quarters attached to the tower. The ocean surrounded everything, day and night. You could hear waves through the walls, through the floor, sometimes through your dreams. The first 2 days were normal, lonely, quiet, predictable. Then came the third evening. The sun disappeared. The beacon activated. The giant lens began rotating. And 32 seconds later, a light appeared in the distance. One flash, pause, two flashes, pause, one flash. I remember standing in the lantern room staring at it, trying to determine what kind of vessel it belonged to. But something felt wrong immediately. The light never moved, not even slightly. Ships drift, boats rock, lights shift. This one didn't. It remained perfectly still, exactly on the horizon, like a star floating above the ocean. I logged in my notebook. Unidentified light source. Bearing east-northeast. Distance unknown. The next night it returned. Same time, same location, same signal. One flash. Pause. Two flashes. Pause. One flash. Again. The same thing happened on the 5th night, and the 6th, and the 7th. By the 2nd week, I stopped thinking it was coincidence. By the 3rd week, I stopped believing it was a ship, because one night a storm rolled through. A massive storm, waves nearly 30 feet high, visibility less than 50 yards. The horizon vanished entirely. The ocean became a wall of darkness. And yet, 32 seconds after the beacon activated, the light appeared again, perfectly visible, unmoving, unaffected by the storm. That was the first time I felt afraid. Not terrified, just uneasy. The kind of feeling you get when reality fails in a small way. When something doesn't behave correctly. When your brain notices a problem before your conscious mind does. I reported it. The harbor office ignored me. I reported it again. They said it was probably atmospheric reflection. I sent photographs. Nobody responded. 3 days later, I received a message. No signature, no name, just a typed note attached to the weekly supply manifest. Stop tracking the return light. That phrase bothered me. Return light. Not mystery light. Not vessel light. Return light. As if somebody already knew exactly what it was. I tried asking the supply captain. The old man unloading fuel drums froze when he heard the words. Then he looked toward the ocean. Not the lighthouse. Not me. The ocean. Like he expected something to be listening. Finally he said, "Don't acknowledge it." Then he left. I laughed afterward. Not because it was funny. Because people laugh when they're nervous. The next night, I decided to test something. The beacon rotated every 12 seconds. A predictable cycle. I waited until the mysterious light appeared. Then I manually interrupted the beacon. Just for a moment. 5 seconds. The lighthouse beam stopped rotating. Darkness covered the ocean. Nothing happened. Then the distant light vanished. Instantly. Gone. Not faded. Not hidden. Gone. The moment I restarted the beacon, the distant light returned. Exactly where it had been before. My stomach dropped. Because it hadn't been answering randomly. It had noticed. It knew when the beacon changed. I spent that entire night staring through binoculars. The light never moved. Never flickered. Never drifted. Just watched. The following morning, I discovered something strange in the records room. There were decades of maintenance logs stored in filing cabinets. Weather reports. Equipment inspections. Supply inventories. Everything. Except for one gap. Between 1987 and 1994. 7 years missing. Completely removed. Not damaged. Not lost. Removed. Someone had intentionally taken them. The empty space bothered me enough that I started digging deeper. That's when I found the hidden notebook. It wasn't hidden well, just taped beneath the lowest drawer. Like somebody wanted it discovered eventually. The first page contained only one sentence. If the return light changes pattern, leave immediately. I sat there reading that sentence for a long time. Then I turned the page. Most of the notebook consisted of observations. Dates, times, distances, signal patterns. The handwriting belonged to multiple people. Different keepers, different years. One entry caught my attention. June 4th, 1991. The light answered 3 flashes tonight. It has never done that before. Another. June 5th. It flashed 3 times again. Generator failed at 2:14 a.m. Heard movement outside tower. Another. June 6th. Something knocked on lantern room glass. No boats nearby. Another. June 7th. I think it knows my name. I stopped reading. My hands felt cold because the dates were consecutive, like watching someone slowly realize they were in danger. And then the entries stopped entirely. No conclusion. No explanation. Just silence. That night, I watched the horizon more carefully than ever. The beacon activated. 32 seconds passed. The light appeared. 1 flash. Pause. 2 flashes. Pause. 1 flash. Normal. I actually felt relieved until the pattern repeated. Again and again and again. It had never done that before. Usually it flashed once and disappeared. Now it continued, repeating the signal endlessly. 1 flash. Pause. 2 flashes. Pause. 1 flash. The pattern looked familiar. Not because of ships. Not because of navigation. Because of Morse code. I rushed downstairs. Pulled out a chart. Translated the signal. 1, 2, 1, A. The next sequence appeared. 1, 1. A different letter. Then another. And another. The thing on the horizon wasn't signaling randomly. It was spelling something. Slowly. Deliberately. Like it knew someone was watching. I spent 2 hours decoding. By midnight, I had a message. Only 4 words. Looking for the keeper. I didn't sleep that night. Because for the first time, I realized the thing answering the beacon wasn't communicating with the lighthouse. It was communicating with whoever happened to be inside it. And somehow, it knew I was there. And the next evening, the message changed. The next evening, I started watching the horizon an hour before sunset. I skipped dinner, ignored the radio check-in, didn't even complete the weather report. I sat in the lantern room with binoculars and a notebook, waiting. Part of me hoped the light wouldn't appear, that maybe I had imagined the message, that maybe exhaustion and isolation had finally gotten to me. People underestimate what loneliness does to the mind. 3 weeks alone on an island changes the way you think. You start talking to yourself. You start hearing meaning where there isn't any. At least that's what I wanted to believe. Then the sun disappeared. The beacon activated. The giant lens began its slow rotation. 32 seconds later, the light appeared, exactly where it always appeared, except this time it didn't wait. The flashes started immediately. Fast, urgent, different. I grabbed the notebook, started translating. The message was shorter this time, only 3 words. Don't look down. I froze, because at that exact moment, I heard something move beneath me. A heavy scrape, directly below the lantern room floor. The sound came from the staircase. Something climbing, slowly, one step at a time. I told myself it was the wind, the old tower settling, the machinery, anything, but I already knew, because the sound wasn't random. It had rhythm, footsteps, and they were coming closer. The message on the horizon repeated, "Don't look down, don't look down, don't look down." The footsteps continued, closer, 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 then stopped directly outside the lantern room door. I stared at the handle. The tower became completely silent. Even the ocean sounded distant. The handle didn't move. Nothing knocked. Nothing spoke. Whatever was outside simply stood there, waiting. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 20. Eventually the footsteps retreated, slowly descending, back down the tower. Only then did I breathe again. The distant light vanished shortly afterward. I stayed in the lantern room until sunrise. The next morning, I searched the entire lighthouse. Every floor, every room, every storage closet. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of entry. No explanation. Just an empty tower surrounded by ocean. And yet something had climbed those stairs. I knew it. The following supply run arrived 2 days later. The same captain, the same old boat, the same nervous expression. Before he left, I showed him the notebook. I expected him to laugh. Instead, his face turned pale. "What is this?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He kept staring at one particular page. Finally, he said, "They didn't burn it." "What?" "The notebook." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He looked toward the lighthouse, then back at me. "Every keeper leaves one." My stomach tightened. "Leaves one what?" "A record." The old man swallowed hard. "They always think they'll be the last." I felt cold. "What happened to the others?" He looked away, and that's when I realized something. He wasn't avoiding the question. He was afraid of the answer. Eventually, he said, "They disappear." The words hit harder than I expected. "Disappear?" He nodded. "Officially, they quit." A pause. Unofficially, he never finished. Instead, he climbed back into the boat. Before leaving, he shouted something over the engine noise. Something I almost didn't hear. "If the signal asked your name." He hesitated. Then, "Lie." The boat disappeared into the fog, leaving me alone again. That night, I locked every door in the lighthouse. I don't know why. A lock wouldn't stop whatever was happening. But fear makes people cling to small things. The beacon activated. 32 seconds later, the return light appeared. This time the signal began immediately. I translated. "Who are you?" My blood ran cold. The captain's warning echoed in my head. "If it asked your name, lie." I don't know why I listened. Maybe because every person who knew about the light seemed terrified of it. Maybe because every instinct I'd screamed not to answer honestly. The lighthouse had an old emergency signal lamp, a backup system for communication. I pointed it toward the horizon. Then I flashed a false name. "Michael." The return light stopped. For almost a minute. Then a new message appeared. "No, you aren't." My hand started shaking. I flashed nothing. I couldn't. I just stood there watching. The light responded again. "Daniel." My heart nearly stopped. That was my name. My actual name. A name nobody on the island should know. A name I had never transmitted. A name I hadn't written anywhere. The signal continued. "We remember you." I backed away from the window. Every rational explanation I had constructed over the past month collapsed. The light wasn't guessing. It knew who I was. And worse, it implied we'd met before. The rest of the message arrived slowly. "We are waiting." Then the light vanished. The next morning, I found footprints. Not outside. Inside. Wet footprints. Starting at the entrance. Leading upward. Spiraling around the staircase. All the way to the lantern room. Then stopping directly beside my chair. I stared at them for a long time. Because there was something wrong with them. They weren't human footprints. Not exactly. They looked human at first glance. 5 toes. Heel. Arch. Normal. Except each print was slightly different. Like whoever made them couldn't remember the correct shape. One footprint had 6 toes. The next had 4. The next was too long. The next too wide. Like an imitation. Like something practicing. I cleaned them immediately. Not because I wanted to, because looking at them made me feel sick. That afternoon, the radio started acting strangely. Random bursts of static, voices hidden beneath the noise. At first, I couldn't understand them. Then I realized something. The voices weren't random. They were recordings, fragments of conversations, people talking, different decades, different accents, different years. And every voice said the same thing. Can you see the light? Over and over. Hundreds of voices, hundreds of people, all asking the same question. That night, I didn't go to the lantern room. I stayed downstairs. I turned off every light except the kitchen lamp. I told myself I wouldn't watch the horizon anymore. I was done. Done investigating. Done translating. Done caring. Then exactly 32 seconds after sunset, something knocked on the kitchen window. 3 times. I nearly jumped out of my chair. The window faced the ocean. There was no deck outside. No walkway. Nothing. Just a 40-foot drop into the sea. Another knock. 3 taps. Slow. Deliberate. I didn't move. The knocking continued. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Then a voice spoke. From outside the glass. Soft. Almost polite. Daniel. I stopped breathing. Because I recognized the voice. It was mine. And whatever was standing outside that window should not have been able to stand there at all. The knocking stopped. Silence returned. Then my own voice whispered through the glass. We found the beacon, and before I could move, before I could think, before I could even decide whether to run, the lighthouse beacon suddenly shut off for the first time in 30 years. And somewhere out in the darkness, something answered anyway. The moment the beacon went dark, the entire island seemed to change. Not visibly, not at first. The walls were still there. The furniture was still there. The ocean was still crashing against the rocks. But something fundamental had shifted. Like a machine that had been humming quietly in the background had suddenly stopped. And now I could hear everything else. The silence wasn't normal silence. It felt crowded. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's the only way I can describe it. The darkness outside no longer looked empty. It looked occupied. I grabbed the emergency flashlight and ran upstairs. The lantern room was pitch black. The giant lens had stopped rotating. The machinery sat motionless. The backup systems were dead. Every indicator light on the control panel was off. I checked the generator status. Nothing. No fault messages. No power failure. No explanation. The lighthouse had simply decided to stop. Then I noticed something outside. The return light. The one on the horizon. It was still there. Only now it was brighter. Much brighter. Without the lighthouse beam competing against it, the thing looked enormous. Far too large to be a ship. Far too bright to be a navigation light. It hung above the water like a second moon. And it was getting closer. I felt my stomach twist. Because for months it had never moved. Never. Now it was approaching. Slowly. Steadily. Deliberately. I grabbed the binoculars. The moment I looked through them, I wished I hadn't. Because the light wasn't a light. Not exactly. It was a tower. Another lighthouse. The same shape. The same height. The same design. Standing in the middle of the ocean where no island existed. And it was moving. Not floating. Not sailing. Moving. Like something impossible was walking beneath the waves carrying it forward. The binoculars slipped from my hands. I stared through the glass with my naked eyes. The distant structure remained visible. Its beacon rotated slowly. And each time the beam crossed the ocean, it pointed directly at me. The radio crackled. Static filled the lantern room. Then a voice spoke. The voice of the previous keeper. Thomas. For the first time, he sounded terrified. Don't let it dock. My throat felt dry. What? Static. Then, whatever happens. A burst of interference swallowed part of the message. Don't let it reach the island. I looked outside. The impossible lighthouse was closer now. Close enough that I could see the windows, the railing, the lantern room, and something standing inside, watching me. The radio screamed with static. Then Thomas shouted, "It's using the beacon." The transmission cut off, and suddenly I understood. The lighthouse wasn't warning ships. It never had been. The beacon was a signal, a guide, a marker. Something out there used it to find the island. Night after night, year after year. The return light wasn't answering the beacon. It was following it. And now that my lighthouse had gone dark, it had arrived. The tower shook. A violent impact rattled the walls. I nearly lost my footing. Another impact followed. Then another. Something had reached the rocks below. I ran downstairs. The front windows overlooked the shoreline. The ocean churned violently beneath the cliff. And there, emerging from the darkness, was a dock. Not a boat. A dock. Old wooden planks extending from the sea toward the island. A dock that had not existed 5 minutes earlier. It connected directly to the rocks, like it had always been there, like the ocean had simply remembered it. Footsteps echoed outside. Not one set, dozens. I backed away from the window. The footsteps climbed the rocks, crossed the dock, approached the lighthouse. The sound reminded me of a crowd leaving a theater. Quiet, orderly, patient. Then came the knocking. Not 3 taps this time. Hundreds. Every wall, every door, every window, simultaneously. An entire building surrounded by visitors. The radio burst to life again. Different voices this time. Not Thomas. Not me. The missing keepers. All of them. Dozens speaking over each other. Don't answer. Don't open anything. Turn away from the windows. Don't let them see you. I cover my ears. The voices continued. Then suddenly all of them stopped. Every single one. And a new voice emerged. A familiar voice. My own. Only older. Much older. Daniel. I froze. The voice sounded exhausted. Broken. Ancient. Listen carefully. The knocking continued outside. Steady. Relentless. I made the same mistake. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The older version of me continued. They aren't trying to get in. A pause. Then, they think you're still one of them. I felt cold. What are you talking about? The voice laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because it sounded defeated. You still don't remember. The tower shook again. Something scraped against the outer wall. Far above, near the lantern room, climbing. The older me whispered, "That's why they chose you." The radio crackled violently. The signal began breaking apart. I leaned closer. What did I forget? Silence. Then, the first time you came here, my stomach dropped because the words triggered something. A memory. Tiny. Incomplete. A flash of sunlight. A fairy. My parents. A lighthouse. A trip I barely remembered from childhood. I stumbled backward. No, that wasn't possible. The older voice continued. You didn't leave alone. The radio died. Every light in the building went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Then the lantern room above me exploded with light. Not my lighthouse beacon. The other one. The beam from the impossible lighthouse outside. It shone through every window simultaneously. The light swept through the building. Searching. Scanning. Like an eye. And somewhere inside that beam, I heard voices. Hundreds of voices. All speaking my name. Not calling. Recognizing. Like a crowd welcoming someone home. Then I saw movement at the end of the hallway. A figure standing in the darkness. Same height as me. Same build. Same face. The version of me from the photographs. The one from 1998. He smiled and said, "You finally came back." The beam stopped moving. The knocking outside ceased. The entire island became silent. And for the first time since arriving at the lighthouse, I realized the thing waiting beyond the ocean wasn't hunting me. It had been waiting for me, patiently, for decades. And the worst part? A small piece of me was beginning to remember why. The memory didn't return all at once. It came in fragments, tiny pieces, like photographs scattered across a floor. The smell of salt, a red raincoat, my mother's hand gripping mine, a ferry cutting through fog, and a lighthouse. This lighthouse. I stumbled backward until I hit the wall. The figure at the end of the hallway didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. He simply stood there wearing my face, waiting. Outside, the impossible lighthouse continued shining its beam across the island. Every sweep of that light made another memory surface. Not enough to understand, just enough to hurt. The radio suddenly hissed again. Thomas returned. His voice sounded weaker now, like he was far away. Don't remember. I looked toward the radio. What? That's how it gets you. The figure smiled wider. Thomas continued. That's what happened to all of us. A pause. Then, the moment you remember, you belong to them again. The transmission died. The figure took a step forward. Only one, but it was enough. Because when he moved, I noticed something impossible. The floorboards didn't creak. The shadows didn't change. The light passed through him slightly. Not like a ghost. More like reality couldn't decide whether he was there. I ran, straight for the control room. I don't know what my plan was. Maybe restart the beacon. Maybe contact the mainland. Maybe just hide. Fear doesn't create good strategies. It creates movement. I slammed the door, shut behind me, locked it, then immediately realized how stupid that was. If whatever was outside could create a second lighthouse in the ocean, a lock wasn't going to matter. The emergency satellite phone sat on the desk. I grabbed it, powered it on, dialed the harbor office. Nothing. No signal. I tried emergency frequencies. Nothing. Every channel returned the same thing. Static. Then voices. Hundreds of voices. Whispering. The same sentence. Over and over. Come back. I threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. The whispering continued anyway. Not from the phone. From everywhere. The walls. The ceiling. The floor. The lighthouse itself. I cover my ears. It didn't help. Because the voices weren't being heard. They were being remembered. And then another memory surfaced. A stronger one. I was 8 years old, standing in this lighthouse. Not visiting. Living here. For a moment I couldn't breathe. That wasn't possible. I had grown up hundreds of miles away. Hadn't I? The certainty I'd carried my entire life suddenly felt fragile. Like a story I'd been told too many times. The control room door opened. Slowly. I didn't hear footsteps. Didn't hear the lock break. One moment the door was closed. The next it wasn't. The other Daniel stood there, expressionless, watching me. You remember the storm. It wasn't a question. I shook my head. No, you do. The memory arrived immediately. A violent storm. Waves crashing against the island. My mother screaming. The lighthouse shaking. A light appearing offshore. Another lighthouse. My heart stopped, because I'd seen it before. Not recently. Back then, when I was a child. The figure nodded, as if he could see the memory forming. You weren't supposed to leave. The room suddenly felt smaller. The walls closer. The air heavier. I looked at him. What are you? His answer came instantly. You. The whispering intensified. The beam outside swept across the windows. And with it came another memory. A boat. A rescue vessel. People arriving. Finding me alone. No parents. No records. No explanation. A child discovered wandering a lighthouse after a storm. The memory fractured there.